The 1994 British Touring Car Championship. Growing up in a world before the internet, I only had access to a stack of dusty VHS tapes, two of which being the 94 and 98 BTCC season reviews. So I'm going to tell you about the car that started it all, the car that turned me into the petrol head that I am today. Depending on who you ask, this car either made the BTCC or signalled the end. This car bent the rules. Whatever you want to call it, is one of the most memorable cars of the Super Touring era. It had been over 10 years since Alfa Romeo last won the BTCC, or the British Saloon Car Championship as it was known back then. Andy Rouse claimed his second driver's title in 1983 behind the wheel of a GT-V6. This was after Steve Soper was disqualified due to bodywork irregularities and engine installation issues on his Rover Vitesse. On a side note, this car is currently owned by a man named Ken Clark, who just so happens to be the man who built and maintained that very car back in the day. By the late 80s, Alfa Romeo desperately needed a replacement for the ageing 75, which had been in production since 1985. Gianfranco Brancatelli did manage to drag the 75 Turbo to victory in the 1988 Italian Super Turismo Championship. However, Alfa desperately needed something more modern and appealing. The 155 was unveiled at the 1992 Geneva Motor Show with styling by the Institute of Development in Automotive Engineering based out of Turin. Nice and catchy name that. This is the same design house that birthed the Lancia Delta. These two, however, seem to be the exception to the rule, as everything else they design seems to be entirely soulless and ugly. The 155 used the Tipo 3 platform shared with Fiat and Lancia, and the boxy styling that was synonymous with 80s Alfa Romeos was retained but softened around the edges to create a shockingly low drag coefficient of 0.29, which unbelievably is the same as a C6 Corvette. Reception was generally lukewarm for the 155, as it was saddled with being the first mainstream Alfa since the Fiat takeover of 1986. The 75 had been conceived prior to Fiat's acquisition of the brand, so as the last independent Alfa, it cast a shadow over the 155. The loss of rear-wheel drive was also frequently cited as the main cause of disappointment. So, in a bid to try and turn around the car's image and therefore sales, Alfa Romeo decided to follow the age-old ethos of whatever wins on Sunday sells on Monday, and took it racing. This would be where the 155 would really shine. The all-new car would form the basis of two distinct touring cars that debuted in 1992. This coincided with the adoption of a new set of regulations that distinguished between the altogether more liberal Division 1 and the tighter Division 2 categories. D1 was used only by the German DTM series, whereas most national and international series embraced the D2 regs, which was similar to the Super Touring rules that had already governed the BTCC since 1990. For the 1992 season, the 155 was entered into the aforementioned Italian Super Turismo Championship under the Group A regulations with the factory works team Alfa Corse. The cars used for this series were the Q4 2-litre turbo all-wheel drive variants. The drivers selected for the assault on the series were intermittent Formula 1 driver Nicola Larini and ex-Formula 1 driver and winner of the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix Alessandro Nannini. The privateer team of Jolly Club Racing also ran 155s. Nicola Larini took pole position for the first race of the season at Monza, with Nannini securing fastest lap of the race. The win, however, had eluded them, and Roberto Ravaglia's BMW M3 took the checkered flag after Larini retired from the race. However, for race 2 at Monza, Larini strapped on his big boy pants and secured the win. The first race of round 2 at the Autodromo dell'Umbria was won by the Jolly Club 155 of Giorgio Francia, with race 2 being won by Emanuele Pirro in another E30 M3. Nannini then won the next 2 races at Mugello, with Larini winning 8 in a row at Autodromo del Levante, Vallelunga Circuit, Imola and the Misano Circuit respectively. I'm not sure what was more impressive that year, how Alfa Romeo came out the blocks with a rocket ship, or Larini's dominance. Giorgio Francia then won the next two races at Autodromo di Puglia for the Jolly Club team. At the penultimate round of the season at the Autodromo Riccardo Paletti, Larini took the race win for the first race. However, in race 2, Rivalia's M3 took the win, marking only the third time all season a non-Alfa Romeo driver stood on the top step of the podium. The final round at Monza was capped off with a win each for Nannini and the other Jolly Club driver of Antonio Tamburini. The 155 took 17 out of a possible 20 victories that year, and first, second, third and fourth in the driver's standings, an astounding feat for a first-year operation. Under the new D2 regulations for the 93 season, BMW got their act together, winning the championship with Roberto Rivalia. Alfa Romeo only managed 6 wins across all cars and only secured third in the standings with Gabriele Tarquini. For the 94 season, Alfa Corse pulled out of the Italian series to focus on their BTCC campaign, leaving it up to the privateer teams. This, however, did not stop the 155 racing and winning in the Super Turismo Championship, having a much better season, securing 9 wins and runner-up in the Drivers' Championship for Antonio Tamburini, driving for the Nord Auto team. 1995 saw the first year without a win for the 155. However, Fabrizio Giovanardi still managed to secure third in the standings behind the all-conquering Audi A4 Quattros of Emanuele Pirro and Ronaldo Capello. As mentioned earlier, Alfa Romeo had been keeping a keen eye on the growing popularity of the BTCC since the beginning of the Super Touring era, and for the 1994 season, the factory Alfa Corse team rolled up to the first round at Thruxton with the 155 Silverstone, wearing some fancy accessories. You see, in order to be eligible for the BTCC back then, 2,500 homologation specials had to be produced. Alfa Romeo pushed the rules to the breaking point with the aero package for their BTCC campaign. The Silverstone came complete with a much larger and adjustable rear wing and adjustable front splitter. Despite the huge cost for Alfa Romeo, all 2,500 cars were produced. This gave the 155 a controversial and sizable advantage over the rest of the field, who at the time were using fairly standard bodywork and aero for the race cars. This became ever more prevalent when it became apparent that the Alfa Romeo dealers only supplied the larger wing thrown in the boot for the owner to fit themselves and not actually fitted to the car. The fact that Alfa Romeo ran the cars with the wings in the retracted position in pre-season testing, thus keeping the extended aero parts a secret until the first race meeting, was equally provocative. But it was not only the winning wings that were special with the Alfa Romeo 155 Silverstone. The cars were built by Alfa Corse in Turin, where the chassis was specifically prepared to be as light and strong as possible. Unnecessary brackets and mountings were removed, and panels were seam welded. The end result was a chassis that was twice as stiff as a road car and 40 kilos lighter than the minimum weight limit. This allowed ballast to be used to fully corner balance the new race car. The road car had a 129 horsepower 1.8 twin-spark engine, which gave a top speed of 125 miles an hour and a measly 10.3 0 to 60 time. The race engine was entirely different, however. It was based on another inline 4-cylinder engine that had been used by Fiat previously in rallying. As with all Super Touring specification engines, these naturally aspirated monsters produced over 300 horsepower. This, however, came with a particularly short rebuild interval of just over 400 miles, a process taking a total of 80 hours to complete. The head was borrowed from the Q4 turbo model, but rotated 180 degrees. This allowed for better cooling of the engine, and for the engine to be mounted lower in the chassis, as the exhaust no longer had to run beneath the sump. It also allowed for a more direct ram air intake to be used to feed the 4 massive throttle bodies. The 155 Silverstone was utterly dominant, and team leader Gabriele Tarquini took pole position, fastest lap, and the race win to start the season. He followed up the maiden win at Thruxton with another trifecta at Brands Hatch. For the second race at Brands Hatch, Simoni managed to secure the fastest lap, with Tarquini once again taking the win. Round 3 at Snetterton saw Simone on pole, Tarquini fastest lap, Tarquini winning the race. Round 4 of race 1 at Silverstone saw Alan Menu on pole, but Tarquini once again taking the win. Round 2 at Silverstone, however, saw Tarquini's winning streak come to an end with Radicic's Mondeo taking the win. During Tarquini's fine run of form, a slew of complaints were lodged, predominantly from Ford, led by Andy Rouse, ironically enough. It culminated in a tribunal before round 6 at Alton Park, where the FIA sided with Ford and ordered Alfa Corse to run the cars with the wings in the retracted position, citing that having bolt-on wings with 31 rivets was very much against the regulations. But Alfa Corse were having none of it and claimed that the cars were within the rules, so they packed up the trucks in protest and defiantly left the circuit. After an appeal before the following race, a compromise was struck that stated Alfa Romeo could run the cars with the wings in the extended positions until the 1st of July, after which they would have to run in the retracted position for the rest of the season. This ruling, alongside the competition from BMW, Ford and Renault developing their own loophole homologation specials, such as the 318IS, and therefore their own aero kits for the racing cars, meant that Tarquini and Alfa Romeo only took one further win, with teammate Giampiero Simoni securing a solitary race win at the end of the season. In spite of this, Tarquini's blistering performance in the first half of the season and the subsequent unfailing consistency in achieving podium results saw him take the Drivers' Championship at Canter, including a 4th place finish from the back of the grid at the final race of the season at Donington Park, while spending more time on 2 wheels than 4. A highlight of the season for spectators, but not for Alfa Romeo, was Tarquini's crash during round 9 at Knock Hill after being pit manoeuvred by Tim Harvey's Renault, his 155 rolling multiple times. The fact Tarquini jumped straight out and walked away from the crash is a testament to the roll cage. I wish the one in my MX-5 was this strong. Alfa Corse finished the 1994 BTCC season with 9 wins from 21 races. Simoni's efforts were enough to secure the Constructors' Championship for Alfa Corse as well. Due to the controversy sparked by this model, the Super Touring rules were changed for the following season. Wings became compulsory for all competitors in a standard form, and 25,000 examples of the road car had to be produced. Content with their work and conscious that the FIA was closing every loophole they could for 1995, Alfa Corse returned to its focus on DTM, leaving ProDrive to run the ultimately unsuccessful title defence with the 155. Simoni was retained, but Tarquini left with Alfa Corse, with Derek Warwick replacing him. 95 ended with Alfa Romeo withdrawing from the championship entirely at the end of the season, after having a highest finish of 4th place after Tarquini returned to replace Simoni at round 9 at Silverstone, after finishing lowly 16th in the championship, despite rather impressively finishing ahead of Simoni and Warwick, even after only competing for half a season. Quite the fall from grace from the reigning champion. For their DTM campaign, Alfa Romeo would use the 155 V6 Ti. This is an entirely altogether different beast, and if this video goes well, I shall cover that in another one.